The Great Hall of Convergence Prime had never been so quiet. Commander Thessa Javeth of the Velthari Empire stood at the observation balcony, her four eyes scanning the ceremony floor below. In her 200 years of service, she had seen many mentor selection days. She had watched young cadets from across the galaxy walk nervously to the platforms of legendary officers. She had seen friendships form across species lines, rivalries born, and futures decided. But she had never seen anything like this. 847 cadets stood in the center of the hall. They came from 12 different species. Some were tall and covered in scales. Others were small and made of living crystal. A few had too many arms and some had none at all. They wore the gray uniforms of the Coalition Academy, the symbol of unity stitched over their hearts. Across from them, 12 platforms rose from the polished floor. On each platform sat a mentor. These were the greatest military minds in the known galaxy. Admiral Korath the Unbroken, who had won 40 battles without losing a single ship. High Commander Sketh Prime, whose calculations had predicted 3 wars before they started. General Voss of the Methane Kingdoms, who had held the borderline for 60 years. And at the end, on the smallest platform, sat Commander Elias Vance, the human. Thessa had argued against including him. Humans were new to the Coalition. They had only made first contact 30 years ago. Their ships were slow. Their bodies were weak. They lived such short lives that by the time they learned anything useful, they died. But the Academy Council had insisted. Humans were members now. They deserved representation. So Elias Vance sat on his platform, looking small and tired. He was perhaps 50 years old, which meant he was already past middle age by human standards. His hair was turning gray. He had no cybernetic enhancements, no genetic modifications, no battle scars that showed through his uniform. He looked like someone's grandfather, not a military commander. The ceremony began with the traditional words. The cadets were told to look upon their potential mentors. They were told to consider carefully. The mentor they chose would shape the rest of their careers. This decision could not be undone. Then the barrier fields dropped, and the cadets were free to move. Thessa expected the usual chaos, cadets running to their preferred mentors, arguments over limited spaces, some crying because their first choice was full. Instead, something strange happened. The cadets did not run in different directions. They moved together, like a single organism. 847 young beings from 12 different species walked in perfect formation across the hall. They walked past Admiral Korath. They walked past High Commander Sketh Prime. They walked past every legendary officer on every platform. And they stopped at the feet of the human. Elias Vance looked down at them. His expression did not change. He did not seem surprised. He simply nodded, as if he had been expecting this all along. The silence in the hall was absolute. Then Admiral Korath stood up from his platform. His massive form blocked out the light. His voice was like thunder. "What is the meaning of this?" No one answered. The cadets remained where they were, sitting cross-legged on the floor around the human's platform. A young Sketh cadet, her crystal body catching the light, sat directly at Vance's feet. A Karath warrior, easily 3 times the human size, had folded his 6 limbs and pressed his forehead to the ground in the traditional pose of respect. Thessa activated her communication device. "Security to the main hall. We have a situation." "Cancel that order." The voice came from Vance. He had not raised it. He had not stood up. But somehow everyone heard him clearly. "There is no situation," Vance continued. "The cadets have made their choice. The rules say they may choose any mentor they wish. They have chosen." "All of them?" Thessa demanded. She flew down from the balcony, her wings carrying her to the floor in seconds. "All 847? This is impossible. This is organized. This is a conspiracy." "It is a choice," Vance said simply. "No mentor has ever been selected by more than 50 cadets. The system is not designed for this. You cannot possibly teach them all." "I do not need to teach them all. I only need to teach them what matters." Thessa felt her anger rising. This human was making a mockery of their traditions. He was embarrassing officers who had served for centuries. She stepped closer to his platform, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You planned this. You manipulated these children. Vance finally looked at her directly. His eyes were a strange color, brown like dried soil. In those eyes, Thessa saw something she did not expect. She saw sadness. I have never spoken to any of these cadets before today, Vance said. I did not ask them to come to me. I did not promise them anything. If you want to know why they are here, Admiral, perhaps you should ask them. Thessa turned to the nearest cadet. It was a young Velthari, barely 30 years old. From his markings, she recognized him as a member of a noble family. Her own family. You, she said. Explain yourself. The young Velthari looked up at her. He showed no fear, which surprised her. Cadets were usually terrified of admirals. Grandmother, he said softly, I have studied every officer in this room. I have read their battle records, their strategies, their victories. They are all great warriors. They have all won impossible battles. Then why do you sit at the human's feet? The young man smiled. Because Commander Vance is the only one who has won impossible battles and still remembers how to cry. Thessa did not understand. She looked at the other cadets, searching for a better answer. But she saw the same expression on every face. Young beings from 12 different species, all looking at the human with something that looked like hope. She turned back to Vance. The human had closed his eyes. For a moment he looked very old and very tired. What have you done to them? She whispered. Vance opened his eyes. Nothing, Admiral. I have done nothing. But perhaps that is exactly what they needed. He stood up slowly, his joints making small sounds of protest. He looked out at the sea of cadets surrounding his platform. Welcome, he said softly. I hope I can be worthy of your trust. And 847 voices, speaking in 12 different languages, answered as one. You already are. The question spread through the station like fire. Why the human? Why did they all choose the human? Admiral Thessa Javeth needed answers. She called the rejected mentors to a private meeting room, far from the cadets and their strange new teacher. 12 of the greatest military minds in the galaxy sat around a table, all of them confused, most of them angry. We need to understand what happened, Thessa said. The cadets clearly planned this together. They must have been communicating in secret. I have already checked the communication logs, said High Commander Sketh Prime. Her crystalline body hummed with frustration. There is nothing unusual, no secret meetings, no coded messages, and yet somehow, 800 cadets from 12 species made the same decision at the same moment. Then how? Admiral Korath demanded. His massive fist hit the table. How did they coordinate? How did they know? The answer came from an unexpected source. A young lieutenant stood at the door, waiting to deliver a report. She was human, assigned to the station as a translator. Her name was Chen. If I may speak, admirals? Thessa waved her forward impatiently. What do you know about this? Lieutenant Chen stepped into the room. She looked nervous, but her voice was steady. The cadets did not need to coordinate. They did not need secret meetings. They simply needed to talk to each other. Explain. Stories, Admiral. They shared stories about Commander Vance, in the dining halls, in the training rooms, during rest periods, small stories, quiet stories, the kind of stories that spread from one friend to another, across all species, across all languages. Sketh Prime leaned forward. What stories? Lieutenant Chen took a deep breath. May I tell you some of them? No one objected, so she began. The first story came from a Korath cadet named Gorth. He was young but already massive, built for war like all his kind. The Korath respected only one thing, strength. They believed the strong should rule and the weak should serve. Gorth had heard a story about Commander Vance from his uncle, who had fought in the border wars. During a battle on a frozen moon, Vance had been separated from his unit. He was alone, injured, armed with only a standard rifle. 200 enemy raiders surrounded his position. Any logical being would have surrendered. Any sensible commander would have saved himself for a prisoner exchange. Vance held the position for 19 hours. He did not have superior weapons. He did not have special training. He simply refused to stop. Every time the raiders attacked, he pushed them back. Every time they thought he was dead, he appeared again. By the end, the raiders were afraid to approach. They believed he was a demon. But that was not the part of the story that changed Gorath. When Coalition reinforcements finally arrived, they found Vance sitting with two wounded raiders. He was bandaging their injuries. He was teaching them how to stop their own bleeding. The same enemies he had been fighting for 19 hours he was now saving. When asked why, Vance said something that Gorth never forgot. "The battle is over. Now we are just people." The second story came from a Sketh cadet named Kira 7. The Sketh were beings of pure logic. They were born from crystal matrices, and their minds worked like computers. They believed that everything could be calculated. Every battle could be predicted. Every outcome could be known in advance. Kira 7 had studied Commander Vance's battle record. She had run the numbers on every engagement he had commanded, and she had found something impossible. In 7 separate battles, Vance had won when the probability of victory was less than 1%. In 3 of those battles, the probability had been effectively 0. By every calculation, by every logical model, he should have lost. His ships should have been destroyed. His crews should have died. But they did not. Kira 7 could not explain it. She checked her calculations 1,000 times. The math was correct. The outcome was impossible, and yet it had happened. She asked her instructor about it. The instructor, an old Sketh who had lived for 3 centuries, gave her a strange answer. Humans do not calculate probability the same way we do. When a human looks at a 1% chance of survival, they do not see failure. They see hope. And sometimes, Kira 7, hope is a variable that our equations cannot measure. The third story came from a human cadet named Thessaly Morn. Thessaly knew things about Commander Vance that other species did not. She knew the stories that humans told only to each other, late at night when they were far from home. She knew about the Kepler Accords. 20 years ago, the Coalition had been on the edge of war with the Syndicate of Outer Systems. Billions of lives hung in the balance. Every diplomatic mission had failed. Every negotiation had collapsed in anger and blame. The Coalition sent Commander Vance. They did not expect him to succeed. They sent him because he was expendable, a human nobody from a species that nobody respected. Vance met with the Syndicate commander, a being called the Iron Voice. The Iron Voice was famous for his hatred. He had lost his daughter in a Coalition attack years before. He wanted revenge, not peace. Vance did not argue with him. He did not make demands. He did not threaten. He simply sat with the Iron Voice for 3 days. He listened. He asked questions about the daughter. He learned her name. He learned her favorite songs. He learned the way she laughed. On the 4th day, the Iron Voice signed the Kepler Accords. The war never happened. Billions of lives were saved. When asked how he did it, Vance said something very simple. "I did not negotiate. I just reminded him that grief is not the same as hate, and that peace is not the same as forgetting." Lieutenant Chen finished speaking. The room was silent. Admiral Thessajaveth looked at the other mentors. She saw something in their eyes that she had not expected. She saw doubt. She saw the beginning of understanding. "These are just stories," she said finally. "Stories do not explain how every cadet made the same choice." Lieutenant Chen shook her head. "With respect, Admiral, you are wrong. Stories are exactly how every cadet made the same choice. Stories are how humans have always changed the galaxy. We are not the strongest. We are not the smartest. We do not live the longest. But we tell stories that make others believe they can be more than they are." She looked toward the door, toward the distant hall where Commander Vance was beginning his first lesson with 800 students. "And sometimes," she said softly, "that is enough." The challenge came on the 7th day. Admiral Thessajaveth stood before the Academy Council and invoked an ancient right, the right of proving. If a mentor's worthiness was questioned, they could be tested. 3 challenges chosen by 3 different species. If the mentor failed, they would be removed, and their cadets would be distributed among the other teachers. Commander Vance accepted without hesitation. The entire station gathered to watch. Cadets, officers, diplomats, and merchants filled the great amphitheater. They wanted to see the human fail, or maybe they wanted to see him succeed. No one was sure anymore. Vance stood alone in the center of the arena. He wore his simple uniform. He carried no weapons. He looked very small under the bright lights. High Commander Sketh Prime announced the first challenge. The Sketh had chosen it, and they valued one thing above all others: intelligence. The Theta collapse, Sketh Prime said, the most difficult tactical simulation ever created. Every known strategy fails. No commander has ever solved it. You will have 1 hour. A holographic display appeared before Vance. It showed a battle in deep space, coalition ships surrounded by enemies, asteroids blocking every escape route, a dying sun ready to explode. The scenario was designed to be impossible. The Sketh had spent 50 years proving mathematically that no solution existed. Vance studied the display. The crowd watched in silence. Minutes passed. Then Vance turned to the audience. "May I borrow something?" he asked. A young cadet in the front row offered her water canteen. Vance took it, thanked her politely, and turned back to the display. He poured the water directly onto the holographic projector. The machine sparked and died. The impossible scenario disappeared. The crowd erupted in confusion. Sketh Prime's crystal body flashed with anger. "That is not a solution. You destroyed the test." Vance shrugged. "The enemy designed this scenario. They chose the terrain, the numbers, the rules. Why would I accept a battle on their terms? In real war, the first thing a good commander does is change the game." He looked up at the council. "The only way to win an unwinnable situation is to refuse to play." The council argued for 20 minutes. Finally, they declared the first challenge a pass. Not because Vance had solved the problem, but because he had demonstrated something more valuable: the ability to question the problem itself. Admiral Korath announced the second challenge. The Korath valued strength above all else. "Single combat," Korath said, his voice booming through the arena. "You will face our greatest warrior. No weapons, no tricks, only your body against his." A massive Korath stepped into the arena. He was called the Mountain That Walks. He stood 3 meters tall. His muscles looked like they were carved from stone. He had killed enemies with his bare hands more times than anyone could count. Vance looked up at him. The human barely reached the warrior's chest. The fight began. The Mountain That Walks hit Vance with a blow that would have killed most beings. Vance flew across the arena and crashed into the wall. The crowd gasped. Slowly, painfully, Vance stood up. The warrior hit him again, and again, and again. Each time, Vance fell. Each time, he got back up. His nose was bleeding. His arm hung at a wrong angle. One eye was swollen shut, but he kept standing. "Stay down," the warrior growled. "You cannot win. You are only hurting yourself." Vance spat blood onto the floor. "I know I cannot win," he said, "but losing is not the same as giving up." The fight continued. Vance was knocked down 17 times. 17 times. He stood back up. On the 18th time, the Mountain That Walks stepped back. He looked at the broken human before him. Then he did something no one expected. He knelt. "I will not continue," the warrior said. "There is no honor in destroying something that refuses to break." Admiral Korath was furious. "You forfeit? A Korath warrior forfeits to a human?" The Mountain That Walks looked at his admiral. "You told me to test his strength. I have tested it. His body is weak, but his spirit?" He shook his great head. "His spirit is stronger than anyone I have ever fought." The council declared the second challenge a pass. Admiral Thessa Javeth announced the third challenge herself. The Velthari valued knowledge and wisdom. "A simple question," she said. "Name the greatest military victory in the history of the galaxy." "Defend your answer," the crowd murmured. This was a trick question. There were hundreds of famous battles: the burning of the Seventh Fleet, the liberation of Korath Prime, the siege of Crystal Station. Each species had their own answer. Whatever Vance chose, he would insult someone. Vance stood in silence for a long moment. His injuries had been quickly treated, but he still looked tired and old. "The greatest military victory," he said finally, "was the siege of Children's Ward 7. No one recognized the name. Thessa frowned. "I have never heard of this battle. Explain." 32 years ago, Vance said, a human colony was attacked by raiders. The defense failed quickly. The colony was burning. Most people fled. But in the central hospital, there was a children's ward. 43 children were too sick to move. His voice was quiet, but somehow it filled the entire arena. A nurse named Maria Santos refused to leave them. She had no military training. She had no weapons. She had only her hands and her heart. The raiders came for the hospital because they wanted the medical supplies. Maria stood in the doorway and would not move. Vance looked directly at Thessa. For 9 days, she protected those children. She talked to the raiders. She bargained with them. She convinced them that killing sick children would bring them bad luck. When talking failed, she fought them with broken furniture. When fighting failed, she shielded children with her own body. On the 10th day, rescue ships arrived. All 43 children were alive. Maria Santos died of her wounds 3 hours later. The arena was completely silent. This battle had no strategic importance, Vance continued. It changed no borders. It decided no wars. It will never be in any history book. He looked around at the hundreds of faces watching him. But those 43 children grew up. They had children of their own. They told the story of the nurse who would not leave them. And they taught their children that courage is not about winning. Courage is about protecting what matters, even when you cannot win. He turned back to Thessa. That is the greatest military victory in history, not because of what it achieved, but because of what it taught. Admiral Thessa Javeth said nothing for a long time. Then slowly she stood. The challenge is complete, she said. Her voice was strange. Commander Vance has passed. As the crowd dispersed, Thessa remained in her seat. She thought about the nurse who died protecting children she could not save. And for the first time in 200 years, she wondered if she had been measuring strength wrong all along. The attack came at midnight. Commander Vance was in his quarters when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed. Emergency doors slammed shut. The station's voice announced a critical failure in the life support systems. Sector 7, the cadet dormitories. 847 young beings were trapped in a section with no air circulation. The sabotage had been precise. Someone had not just broken the machines. They had destroyed the backup systems too. They had locked the emergency doors from the outside. They wanted the cadets to die slowly. Vance ran through the corridors. Other officers were trying to reach Sector 7 from outside, but the security lockdown was total. The saboteurs had planned carefully, but they had not planned for the maintenance tunnels. Vance was small for a human, and humans were small for the galaxy. He squeezed through passages that would have stopped any other species. He crawled through vents that had not been used in decades. His uniform tore, his hands bled. 20 minutes later, he dropped from a ceiling panel into the cadet dormitory. 800 young beings looked up at him. Their eyes were wide with fear. The air was already getting thin. Some of the smaller cadets were having trouble breathing. Vance did not waste time on comfort. He did not give speeches about hope. He simply looked at them and said, "Get up, all of you. You are not students anymore. Today you are officers. Show me what you have learned." The cadets responded. Kira 7, the Sketh cadet, immediately started calculating. Her crystal mind processed the oxygen levels, the room sizes, the number of beings, the time remaining. "We have 4 hours," she announced. "If we reduce activity and gather in the central hall, we can extend that to 5. Gorath, the Korath warrior, began organizing teams. "We need to find alternate air sources. Check every storage room. Look for emergency tanks, sealed containers, anything." Thessaly Morn, the human cadet, ran to the maintenance panels. "The life support is destroyed, but the raw systems might still work. If we can bypass the main controls and manually activate the air processors." "You cannot," Kira 7 said. "The processors require parts that we do not have. Then we make the parts." Thessaly was already pulling equipment from the walls. Training dummies have air circulation in their suits. Medical scanners have small fans for cooling. We take what we have and build what we need. The work began. Vance did not lead. He walked among the cadets, watching, suggesting, encouraging. When a young Velthari panicked, Vance sat with her until she calmed. When a Korath team hit a dead end, Vance asked questions that helped them find a new path. When arguments broke out between species, Vance reminded them that dead beings cannot disagree. 3 hours passed. The air grew thinner. Some cadets collapsed and had to be carried to the center where oxygen was concentrated. Then something unexpected happened. A young Velthari cadet named Seer approached Vance. She was Admiral Thessa's granddaughter, the one who had called Vance the commander who remembered how to cry. "Commander," she said, "I have been monitoring outside communications. The saboteurs are trapped in Sector 9. The lockdown caught them too. Their life support is also failing." Vance looked at her. "How long do they have?" "Less than us. Maybe 2 hours." Around them, cadets stopped working. They had heard. Some faces showed satisfaction. Others showed uncertainty. A Korath cadet growled, "Let them die. They tried to kill us." "They are our enemies," another agreed. Vance said nothing. He simply looked at Seer. The young Velthari understood. She turned to face her fellow cadets. "When we fix our life support," she said, "we can extend the repairs to Sector 9. It will be harder. It will take more time. It will put us at greater risk." "Why should we?" someone demanded. Seer thought about all the stories she had heard. The wounded raiders that Vance had bandaged. The enemy commander whose grief he had honored. The nurse who had protected children she could not save. "Because mercy is not weakness," Seer said. "Mercy is strength that does not need to prove itself." The words hung in the thin air. Then Kira 7 spoke. "If we extend repairs to Sector 9, survival probability decreases by 12%. "I know," Seer said. "It is not logical." "I know." Gora stepped forward. His massive form blocked out the light. "My people believe the strong rule the weak. We believe mercy is for fools." He looked at Vance. The human's face was calm, waiting. "But my people have been at war for 3,000 years, Gorath continued. "Perhaps it is time to try being fools." One by one, the cadets agreed. Not all of them. Some still wanted revenge, but enough. Enough to make the choice. The work continued, faster now, more desperate. Cadets from 12 species worked together, building a system that should have been impossible. They used parts from training equipment, furniture, even their own uniforms. They ignored the boundaries between disciplines, between species, between enemies and friends. With 30 minutes of air remaining, Thessaly connected the final wire. The machines hummed to life. Fresh air flowed through the vents, in Sector 7 and in Sector 9. When the emergency doors finally opened, rescue teams found something they did not expect. 800 cadets standing in perfect formation, tired but alive. And behind them, a small group of saboteurs, also alive, guarded but unharmed. Admiral Thessa Javeth pushed through the crowd. She found Commander Vance sitting against a wall, exhausted. His face was pale. His breathing was shallow. She sat down beside him. "You could have let them die," she said quietly. "The saboteurs, they tried to kill your students." "Yes. No one would have blamed you." "I would have blamed me." Thessa was quiet for a long moment. "My granddaughter. She led the vote to save them." "She did. I do not understand her choice. I do not understand any of this." Vance closed his eyes. "You will," he said. "Give it time." Thessa looked at the cadets around her. They were helping each other stand. They were sharing water. A Korath was carrying a wounded Sketh. A human was teaching a Veltari how to bandage a cut. "What have you done to them?" she whispered. Vance opened his eyes. For the first time, he smiled. "I showed them what they could be. The rest, they did themselves." 5 years passed. The graduation ceremony was the largest in Coalition history. 847 cadets stood in perfect rows on the great platform of Convergence Prime. They wore the white uniforms of commissioned officers now. On their chests, they carried the symbols of 12 different species, united under one purpose. The galaxy had never seen anything like them. They called themselves Vance's cohort. The name had started as an insult from jealous officers. Now it was worn with pride. In 5 years, these cadets had broken every record at the academy. They had the highest marks in tactical training, in diplomatic studies, in engineering and medicine and every other field. But those were just numbers. What made them different was how they worked together. A Korath and a Sketh had developed a new engine design by combining warrior instinct with mathematical precision. A human and a Velthari had negotiated a trade agreement that ended a 50-year economic war. A mixed team of 6 species had rescued a colony ship that everyone else had given up for lost. They did not compete with each other. They completed each other. And through it all, Commander Elias Vance had watched. He had guided. He had taught. Now he sat on the same platform where the cadets had first chosen him, 5 years ago. He looked older. His hair was completely white. His hands shook slightly when he moved. He needed help to stand. Admiral Thessa Javeth stood beside him. In 5 years, much had changed between them. She had gone from enemy to rival, to student to friend. She was the one who had discovered his secret. Elias Vance was dying, a genetic condition common to humans from the early colony worlds. Their bodies wore out faster than normal. Medicine could slow it but not stop it. Vance had known before, Mentor Selection Day. He had known he would not live to see his students graduate, but he had accepted them anyway. "You should have told them," Thessa said quietly. "They deserve to know." "They did not need to know," Vance replied. His voice was weaker now, but still steady. "They needed to learn. Grief can wait. Learning cannot." The ceremony began. One by one, the graduates approached the platform. But they did not come to receive medals or ranks. Those had already been given. They came to give. Gorth the Korath was first. He had grown even larger in 5 years, a mountain of muscle and honor. He knelt before Vance and held out a blade. "Among my people, this is given only to the greatest warriors. You taught me that the greatest battle is the one we fight against our own hate." He placed the blade in Vance's trembling hands. "You are Korath now. Your name will be remembered in our songs forever." Kira 7 came next. Her crystal body glowed with colors that Thessa had never seen before. "I have encoded your teachings into my core matrix," she said. "Every lesson, every story, every moment. When I am gone, my crystal will be placed in the great library of my people. Your words will be preserved for 10,000 years." Thessaly Morn approached with tears on her face. She had become a captain, the youngest in human history. She did not bring a gift. She brought a memory. 32 years ago, a nurse named Maria Santos protected 43 children on a burning colony. "I found the records. I found the survivors." Her voice broke. "Commander, she was your mother." The crowd fell silent. Vance closed his eyes. A single tear ran down his weathered face. "She died when I was 12 years old," he said softly. "I was one of the 43 children. I never forgot what she taught me." One by one, 847 graduates came forward. Each brought something from their culture: a Velthari clan marking, a song from the Methane Kingdoms, a prayer from species whose gods had different names but asked the same questions. By the end, Elias Vance was covered in the symbols of 12 civilizations. He was a father to all of them. When the last graduate had presented their gift, Vance slowly stood. Thessa helped him, her 4 hands gentle on his frail shoulders. He looked out at the sea of faces before him, his students, his children, his legacy. "I have been asked many times," he began, "why you chose me, a weak human, an ordinary man, a being who would not live long enough to see you become what you are." He paused to catch his breath. "I think I finally understand the answer." He looked at the Korath warriors who had learned to show mercy, at the Sketh intellectuals who had learned to feel hope, at the Velthari nobles who had learned to question tradition, at all the young beings who had learned to see themselves in each other. Every species survives by becoming more of what they are. The Korath became stronger, the Sketh became smarter, the Velthari became more disciplined. But humans? We survived by becoming more like each other, and then more like everyone we met. His voice grew stronger, powered by something beyond his failing body. "We are the species that absorbs, that adapts, that carries pieces of everyone we touch. That is why you sat at my feet, not because humans are better, but because humans are mirrors." He spread his arms, encompassing them all. "In us, you saw the best parts of yourselves reflected back." The amphitheater was silent. Then slowly, 847 officers stood. They did not applaud. They did not cheer. They simply stood united and bowed their heads. Elias Vance died 3 weeks later, surrounded by his students. But his death was not an ending. In the years that followed, Vance's cohort spread across the galaxy. They became admirals and ambassadors, doctors and diplomats. They served on each other's worlds. They married across species lines. They raised children who had never known the old hatreds. And in every academy, on every world, the first lesson taught to new cadets was this: when you choose a mentor, do not look for the strongest or the smartest or the one who will live the longest. Look for the one who sees you truly. Look for the one who believes you can be more than you are. Look for the mirror, because in the end, the greatest gift a teacher can give is not knowledge or skill. It is the simple belief that their students can change the galaxy, and sometimes that belief is enough.